Yeah, yeah. We have Dr. Minish Sheth with us today, and her topic is prebiotics and gut health. She will be presenting some evidence-based study to show the linkage between prebiotics and how it is linked with the gut health and how the consumption of prebiotics can improve the gut health. She is a very senior teacher from Department of Foods and Nutrition of MSc Baroda. So welcome, ma'am, and you can start your presentation. We are
Okay.
privileged to have you over here.
Thank you, Arpi. I thank the organizers of the Parul University for having invited me to speak to you all about the topic that is so close to my heart. I've done almost 15 years of research in this area, and I hope I'll be able to do justice to this topic. Okay. So the topic is prebiotics and gut health, evidence-based studies. As we all know, before I really go to the topic of prebiotics, I would like to tell you something about the NCDs that we all are suffering from. And the burden of NCDs have really increased with life expectancy. It has increased from 41 It has increased from 41% in 1960 to 66% in 2020. Now, the projected prevalence of the cardiac heart disease and diabetes in India can be seen in this slide. Again, it is remarkable. I mean, it is really alarming to see that in 2010, we had diabetes, 38 million people suffering from diabetes, and whereas in 2025, it is projected that diabetes will be there in something around 70 million people. So that's again an alarming situation. Also, the coronary heart disease in 2010, about 47 million people suffered from that, and in 2025 it is projected that it is 75 million people will be suffering from coronary artery disease. Even rise in hypertension in the last 6 decades in India has risen from 2% to 25%. So we can witness that these diseases. I think I can hear some noise. Can someone put off? Is everybody on the mute?
It was me. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay. Can I continue? Okay. Now, there are certain behaviors that can increase the risk of NCDs. What are these behaviors? One of the most important behavior that can increase the risk of all these metabolic disorders is unhealthy diet. And we know that if one is consuming unhealthy diet, when I say it is overnutrition I'm talking about, and 1 in every 3 is overweight. And second most important reasons that is really causing the rise in NCDs that I just showed is physical inactivity. 1 in every 10 individuals is seen to be obese. So what are the solutions for this? How can we treat or how can we reduce the rising trend of non-communicable disease in our population? Can you all hear me? Hello? Can
Yes,
you all
ma'am,
hear
I
me?
can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So currently the most popular mode of treatment and preventions that are available are pharmacological drugs, right? But as per WHO, the changes in dietary pattern and increasing in physical activity and improving lifestyle are the other 3 most important modes of treatment. Now, beyond the diet and exercise that I have been talking about, there are some functional foods. These have the potential positive effects on health beyond basic nutrition, and they promote optimal health and help reduce the risk of the diseases. Now, if we want to switch to the topic of prebiotics and gut health, we must know what the gut is. Our gut, human gut, that is our intestinal tract, is composed of. The 25 to 35 foot long gastrointestinal tract of an adult human is estimated to nurture about 100 trillion viable bacteria. And this is approximately 10 times the total number of cells in the human body. And these live bacteria account for around 2 pounds of body weight. The density of the microorganisms increases dramatically from 1000 CFU per ml in the stomach to 100 billion CFU per gram in large intestines. This is very important to understand, because when I will show you the slides of how the gut health, gut meaning when I'm talking about the gut, this is our gut that I'm talking about, especially the colon, the large intestines, where there are 100 billion CFU of organisms that are residing. Now, what is the type of organism that are residing in our gut? Now, there are some tummy buddy and some tummy baddie. That means there are some good organisms as well as there are some bad organisms. We are basically talking about the organisms that are residing in our colon. Okay. So what is tummy buddy? So tummy buddy are those which are desirable. They create unfavorable conditions for the growth of pathogenic bacteria such as Bifidobacterium, Eubacterium, and Lactobacillus. And so these are the good bacteria, the Bifidobacterium, the Lactobacillus, and the Eubacterium. Whereas tummy baddie, that is those which are harmful to our body, they are the undesirable or promote environment which is favorable for increased proliferation of pathogenic bacteria such as Clostridia, E. coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter. Now, usually it's not that we can claim that a human body can have just good bacteria or just the bad bacteria. Usually there is a balance. In a healthy human being, there's a balance between beneficial bacteria and harmful bacteria. And this balance is very essential to it's very essential to maintain good digestive health. So what factors will affect the good digestive health or promotion of good gut bacteria in our diet? So in our health. So the factors that will affect gut microflora are pH. Low pH is favorable because at a higher pH, there will be proliferation of bad bacteria. Intake of antibiotics again will harm, it will increase the number of bad bacteria. If you're ill, obviously you're taking medicines and all, it will increase the colonization of bad bacteria in the gut. Aging, with age also, the colonization of the bad bacteria is more. When you're under stress, harmful bacteria colonize more. And under nutrition and infection, as I just said, you will be taking some antibiotics, and this infection will also increase the colonization of harmful bacteria. And diet. Under the diet, if you're not taking the right type of diet, if you're taking lots of fatty foods, then also the colonization of the bad bacteria will increase. And therefore, however, if in your diet you are including prebiotics and probiotics, the colonization of the good bacteria will improve. Okay. So we just talked about probiotics and prebiotics that will improve the colonization of good bacteria. So what are probiotics? Let us quickly define them as live bacteria and some yeast also that are good for your health. And these, especially your digestive system, we usually think of bacteria as something that causes illness, right? Don't you think most of us, we think that, oh, bacteria, oh, they'll cause illness. But no, probiotics, now you must remember that they are often called good bacteria or helpful bacteria because they keep our gut healthy. Okay, they also not only keep our healthy, how they aid in digestion, it improves the bowel movement, they produce beneficial effects on health, and most importantly, if you're taking enough of probiotics in your diet, they prevent harmful bacteria from multiplying in the intestine. And what is important is when you're consuming probiotic bacteria, they reach live in your colon. They do not get affected by the high pH of your stomach and low pH of your stomach, and high pH of your intestine, small intestine. These are some of the examples of prebiotics and probiotics. Probiotics are live organisms. Okay, that beneficially affect the host by selectively stimulating the growth or activity of one or more limited number of bacteria in the colon. Okay, they are the good ones. Prebiotic is a food ingredient. They are not bacteria. So don't get confused. There's many a time the students get confused between the prebiotics and the probiotics. Probiotics are bacteria, whereas prebiotics are non-digestible food ingredient. Okay, they affect the host by selectively stimulating the growth or activity of one or limited number of bacteria in the colon, and thus improve the host health. Okay. So what are the actions of prebiotics? We just saw some of the prebiotics, right? So what are its actions? They have anti-carcinogenic activity. They have antimicrobial activity. They lower the triglyceride levels. They stabilize blood glucose levels. They boost the immune system. They improve mineral absorption. If you're taking lots of prebiotics, they help in the growth of probiotics, and which improve the mineral absorption, and they get rid of the harmful microorganisms, which I just said, and they also prevent constipation as well as diarrhea. Now, what are these different types of prebiotics? Now, prebiotics can be classified, they're mostly the carbohydrates, okay? They're disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. Under the disaccharides, they are lactulose, lacticol. Under the oligosaccharides, the popular ones are fructo-oligosaccharides, soybean oligosaccharide, galacto-oligosaccharides, xylo-oligosaccharides, and inulin. So these are the popular oligosaccharides. We shall, in my further slides, we will be discussing more about the fructo-oligosaccharides. Okay, these are the prebiotics that will help in improving the gut health. And then there are polysaccharides, which are resistant starch. They also help in the growth of the good bacteria. So they help. So what do? Why do you take prebiotics? Because intake an amount of prebiotics. It's not that if you take a little bit of prebiotics, your health will improve. No. What is important is the type of prebiotic and the amount of prebiotic that you take will greatly influence the colonization of probiotics in the gut. Am I going too fast? Are you able to understand? Or shall I go a little slow?
Ma'am, I think the speed is fine for me.
It's fine?
But
Okay.
for students, maybe a little bit slow.
Okay, I will go a little bit slow. So let us now look at FOS as a prebiotic. Okay. So what is FOS? It is a oligosaccharide, which refers to short chain of sugar molecules. It can be produced by degradation of inulin, it's another molecule, or polyfructose. And the degree of polymerization of FOS ranges from 10 to 60. That means you may have FOS in the range of 10, 15, 20, up to 60 it can go. And it is linked by beta-2-1 linkages. What are the properties of FOS? What is FOS? Fructo-oligosaccharide. Why are we studying FOS? Because this is a prebiotic which will help in improving our gut health. So we need to know its properties. It resists the hydrolysis by salivary and intestinal digestive enzymes. Okay, that means if you take FOS, your enzymes, your digestive enzymes will not be able to act upon it. And that is a property of FOS. And in the colon, FOS is fermented by anaerobic bacteria. These are some of the food sources of FOS. But we don't commonly consume these. We don't except for the green onions, that is leeks. We don't commonly consume asparagus, artichoke, choke. We do consume onions, chicory, Jerusalem, soybean. So all these foods are rich sources of FOS. However, the natural sources of FOS, if we want to consume and bring about a beneficial effect in the health, we have to consume them in very large quantities, which is not very practical. So most of the studies that we conducted in the department, the research that we conducted in the department were done with use of FOS, which is synthetically produced. What is a calorie? Is it that if you consume FOS, you will be consuming lot of calories? No, 1 gram of FOS will give you only 1.5 kilocalorie. Okay. And is it safe to consume? Since I said that it is to be consumed in the synthetic form, is FOS safe to consume? Yes. According to the Food and Drug Administration 2002, it was estimated that about 12.8 grams of FOS per person is absolutely safe. However, even people who have been taking more than 20 grams to 30 grams, what are the side effects observed? The side effects are flatulence, bloating, abdominal distension. If you take a lot of FOS, but if you take between 3 to 20 grams, it's safe. Now, let us see how FOS will help in improving not only the gut health, but even reducing the parameters of various diseases. Okay, so my presentation is basically going to focus on the heart health and diabetes. If you consume FOS, how does it benefit heart health and diabetes? And how does it benefit obesity? FOS also helps in reducing weight. And how does it affect undernutrition? Okay, so my study will mainly, this presentation will mainly focus on these three things. And the parameters that are studied for heart health will be HSCRP, that is highly sensitive C-reactive protein. This is one of the parameters. If it goes up, that means your heart health is bad. TNF alpha, IL-6, LPS, all these are the pro-cytokines parameter. That means they will reduce the heart health, or they will in fact they will not really help in maintaining a good health. So we chose these parameters for studying the heart health. Then the gut microflora. As we have already been saying that prebiotics, probiotics help in colonization of good gut microflora. So what if we give FOS to these people? Will the bifidobacteria, that's the good bacteria, and lactobacilli improve? Will E. coli reduce if we take this? E. coli is a bad bacteria. Okay. And thirdly, whether the gut hormones, okay, GLP-1, leptin, will get affected, okay, by taking FOS, and whether the short chain fatty acids. I'll come to it a little later as to what is the role of short chain fatty acids in the human gut. So let's start with some of the studies which we conducted on heart health and diabetes. So what we did here was, this was the one study that we took both prebiotic as well as probiotic, which is known as synbiotic. Okay, we supplemented the pre-hypertensive subjects with prebiotic and probiotic together, and these pre-hypertensive subjects also had type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, so we took these subjects of diabetics who had pre-hypertension, and we tried to give them the synbiotic product, that is prebiotic plus probiotic. Okay. What were the results? What did we find when we gave them this product, synbiotic product, for 2 months? Every day they were supposed to take this. And what we did was, we brought their stool sample to the laboratory for analysis, and we tried to, and also we took their blood sample for analysis. And we tried to see if there were changes in their heart health as well as in their gut microflora. Okay. This study was published in International Journal of Advanced Research, and by my students. Okay. And it was conducted in Assam. All right. And the study showed that synbiotic supplementation. Can you all see the blue bar? Blue bar? It has, actually, this particular slide shows the HSCRP value. HSCRP above 1 is supposed to be harmful. Here at the baseline, when we did not give them anything, it was 1.123, whereas after supplementation with FOS or the synbiotic product, their HSCRP reduced to 0.63, showing that FOS or the symbiotic product had beneficial effect on their HSCRP values. Okay, and it reduced by 48%. Similarly, when we tried to see, since they were all diabetic subjects, we wanted to see their fasting blood sugar levels. What did we find? That in the control, can you see the first two bars are for the control group where we did not give the symbiotic, whereas the next two bars are the experimental group where symbiotic supplementation was given. And what we found that there was a reduction by 4.67% in the fasting blood glucose. Similarly, there was a reduction in the by 7.49% in the postprandial blood glucose levels. I hope all of you are aware of all these parameters in diabetes. Also, we wanted to see HbA1c, which is a long-term standing of blood sugar level, which will reflect for how long diabetes is controlled in these patients. And we found that the symbiotic supplemented group, the next two bars, they had significant about reduction in their HbA1c levels also by 14.8%. Similarly, their systolic blood pressure also reduced by 6.2% since they were all hypertensive, and their diastolic blood pressure also reduced from 85.5 to 78.2, which almost came down to normal in the symbiotic supplemented group. Okay, so this, what does it indicate? That the symbiotic intake must have helped in the colonization of the good bacteria. I'm not showing the data for the colonization of the bacteria, but it reduced the colonization of the bad bacteria and increase the colonization of the good bacteria. So when good bacteria will sit in our intestines, it will increase short chain fatty acids because they ferment the foods that is coming there and the good bacteria, and they produce short chain fatty acid, which in turn will reduce the pathogenic growth in the intestine, which will decrease endotoxemia. And when endotoxemia reduces, your HSCRP values also reduces. Similarly, when short chain fatty acid, due to the presence of symbiotic, it increases the gut hormones, that is GLP-1, GIP. It increases insulin sensitivity. And that is why we must have found reduction in the fasting PP1, especially the HbA1c. And it also reduces the FBS and PP2PS. So this is the effect of symbiotic supplementation we found on diabetes and hypertensive patients. So what did we conclude? The daily intake of 10 grams of 1 gram of symbiotic food improves glycemic control, reduces pro-inflammatory markers, and reduces blood pressure. Okay, this is actually 10 grams. There's a mistake there of FOS. Okay. Now let us move on to another study. Are we all good? Are you understanding? Can we move on to another study on obesity?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we know obesity in the beginning. In the first slide itself, I showed that there is a significant increase in the obese individuals, not only in urban cities, but also in the rural areas. And therefore, we can try to conduct the study in the rural area, and it was a rural industrial project. I think this slide will confuse you people a little, but what I will simply like to tell you in this slide that when the colonization of good bacteria takes place, okay, then the L cells will increase GLP-1 and reduce ghrelin. Ghrelin is a hunger hormone. Okay, that means when good bacteria will reside in your body, the hunger hormone, which is ghrelin, it will reduce. Okay, and when hunger hormone will reduce, you tend to eat less. Okay, and therefore there may be a relationship between good bacteria and eating less and therefore reduction in the obesity. Okay, so let us see. This slide also shows, but when there is colonization of bad bacteria, then what happens? There is more production of lipopolysaccharide, which is endotoxin, and this causes inflammation in liver, inflammation of the macrophages, infiltration takes place, and also there is decrease in insulin sensitivity or increase in diabetes. So we have found that there is a direct link between good bacteria colonization and your low grade inflammation. Okay, this slide also shows a similar thing, that when there is bad bacteria colonization, the barrier function gets affected. That means all of you have been studying some amount of physiology, I guess. So your epithelial barrier function वो थोड़ा leak हो जाता है. It becomes leaky. Okay, so leak हो जाता है. There is a easy entrance of the toxins into your blood, and this toxin will cause you the metabolic syndrome and thus increase in CVD, cardiovascular diseases. So this slide is not, don't get confused, or it's not a difficult slide to understand, but it just tells you that when LPS leaks through the epithelial barrier, specifically when your gut is not healthy. When your gut is not healthy, epithelial will get leaky. Okay. So this study that I told you that we conducted in an industrial project, it was in rural Baroda, and we found that at the baseline level, okay, we wanted to know whether normal people have good bacteria, more bacteria than the obese people or no. We found that lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, which are good bacteria, okay, they're the good bacteria, they were more in normal people. Can you see the blue bars? Yes? Can you see the blue bar?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so they are the bars for lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, okay? So they are more in normal people, and whereas in obese people, the red bar is for obese people. You can see that more of E. coli is there in the obese people, okay, which is a bad bacteria. So what does it tell us? That even in normal people, even you have not given any FOS, nothing, just obesity per se, if you try to study, you will find that in obese people, the colonization of bad bacteria is more than the good bacteria, okay? The picture that you see, moving picture, is that of a Salmonella typhimurium. Okay, so this is what this slide is trying to say. So what are we trying to say here? Basically, obese people have more amount of bad bacteria colonization than the good bacteria colonization. Normal weight subjects had significant better colonization of good bacteria, that is lab and bifidobacteria, whereas lower enteric pathogenic count. So obese, another parameter, that is, we had this BMI, you all must be studying all that. BMI had obese subjects with higher BMI, okay, those who were more obese, okay, had significant higher levels of LPS. LPS is nothing but the toxin. So obese people who were, say, more obese, you know, they had higher levels of toxins, but they were suffering from endotoxemia and lower GLP level. GLP is a good hormone, okay, which will induce satiety. That means, so that they had, obese people had lower GLP levels as compared to non-obese people, okay. What does this slide tell us? That when we tried to see the anthropometric biochemical and microbial profile of obese subjects based on dietary fiber, you know, whether you people, sometimes you must be thinking that if we take good amount of dietary fiber, not necessarily probiotic, prebiotic, but just good amount of dietary fiber, does it have any relationship with endotoxemia? Yes, we found that subject
Hello?
who were
Ma'am?
taking more than 50 had lesser weight than those, yes.
No, nothing.
Yes?
मैम
You
आपका
want to
आवाज
say?
थोड़े टाइम के लिए कट हो गया था.
वो तो बताए, अब आ रहा है?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So here I'm trying to say that if you take more fiber in your diet, then your GLP levels, GLP is a satiety hormone, it's better and less of endotoxemia. Okay, it is positively correlated with colonization of bifidobacteria. That means these people who were taking more fiber had better colonization of good bacteria. Okay, and they also had better values for GLP and not too good values for the toxins, that is LPS. Okay. When we tried to, so obese people were detected with higher LPS. That means LPS, you must remember, it is lipopolysaccharide, an indicator for endotoxemia. Can you all hear clearly? Hello, can you all hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So obese people, they were detected with higher lipopolysaccharide values, significant higher GLP values, okay, and was reported and whereas higher GLP values, that means GLP indicates your satiety. That means you feel satisfied very quickly. Obese people, they want to eat more and more all the time, right? But the normal people, they don't want to, they get satiated very fast. So they had a normal period where people had a higher amount of GLP values. Okay. So what did this anthropometric values of obese subjects indicated? They indicated that significant reduction in weight was seen after they took FOS, okay, for about 2 months. And even there was increase in the gut hormones, that is GLP भी बढ़ा उनका, obese लोगों का GLP भी बढ़ा, and it affected their satiety levels also. Let's see उनका microbiodata कैसा था. Okay, so we had 30 control subjects, we had 30 experimental subjects. Experimental subjects को हमने FOS खिलाया था. Okay, we found that the two good bacteria, Lab and Bifido, they increased by 14 and 10%, whereas the enteric bacteria in those people whom were fed with FOS, that is fructooligosaccharides, their enteric bacteria reduced by 20%. So there is a direct link between your gut health and your obesity. Okay, now let's move to the next study. That is, if we give liquid FOS, what happens? What happens to the inflammatory marker? See, inflammation is one condition, where the cell is not able to work normally. Okay, and so when you give FOS, there will be reduction, improvement in the inflammatory markers and the gut health of the moderately active and sedentary obese adults. So what we did was, we did a study in which double blinding was done. I don't know whether you all will understand what is double blinding and all, but at the time of classifying the subjects into two categories, we allocated the codes using random numbers, coding the supplements, and then we decoded it at the time. That means the investigator did not know what is being given to the subjects. Okay, so this is a very good study design. What did we find in there? So which were the inflammatory markers we studied? Let me tell you. One was HSCRP. I've already been talking about it earlier also. One is TNF alpha. This also causes inflammation. Okay, and leptin. All these are inflammatory markers. We found that there was a significant difference in the inflammatory markers of obese and non-obese people at the baseline. That means अभी कुछ खिलाया नहीं है इनको. अभी ये लोग at the baseline. Just जब हमने उनका blood लिया, we tried to see all these three parameters. We found that the inflammatory markers of obese people was much higher. Can you see? 1.43, 2.91 HSCRP. Similarly, TNF alpha 3.87, 6.87, and leptin 5,165 and 12,106. So this were the great differences we found in the inflammatory markers at the baseline. This clearly shows that obesity is an inflammatory disease. Obesity is not just that one looks good, chumpy, it's a disease. Obesity is now been termed as an inflammatory disease, and it can be very well proved by this particular slide. So all the inflammatory markers, that is hsCRP, TNF-alpha and leptin, were significantly higher in obese subjects as compared to non-obese subjects. What about the bifidobacteria counts? We found that those who were in the experimental subjects, the bifidobacteria count increased by 6%, whereas in both in the moderately active subjects as well as sedentary subjects. Activity also affected the colonization of bifidobacteria count. Now, this we have been talking about the heart health, diabetes, and now let us move on to undernutrition. Okay, we know that whether FOS will help improve the health of the undernourished children. We know so much of activities going on throughout the country about improving the undernutrition status of our children. So, and one of the major reasons why undernutrition persists, even though after giving them so many after launching so many nutritional programs, undernutrition still persists. One of the reasons is that they suffer from diarrhea due to unhygienic conditions prevailing. And secondly, they also suffer from common colds in the children below 5 years of age. This is a very common thing. And this is also their IgA levels are generally very high. So when common colds incidences increases, their IgA levels also go up. So this study we conducted in undernourished children, and we've tried to see that if what is the effect of whether undernourished children have got a poor gut health or no. Okay, what do you all feel? Undernutrition children will have a poor gut health or no? Can someone reply? Will their gut health be normal? Are you all there?
Mama, I think that it would be a mention.
Okay, let us see as the slide we go. Okay, so let us see what happens. We know that malnutrition rate is still a cause of concern in our country, and we have still not literally touched upon this important area of gut health in these children. Okay, so healthy intestinal microflora is a positive health asset. Okay, and that crucially influences the normal structure and functional development of mucosal immune system. Let me tell you one more thing, that 90%, 70% of our immune system is situated in our colon. Okay, so if our colon becomes unhealthy, our immunity literally goes down. Okay, and there is an increasing evidence that fermentable dietary fibers and newly prescribed prebiotics, they can modulate various properties of immune system, including those of gut-associated lymphoid tissue, which is located in our gut. So we conducted one study here also, and we enrolled, undernourished children, and we tried to see if there is any difference in the gut health of the nourished and the undernourished school-going children. So because this is not yet established fully, whether there is a difference between the gut health of nourished and undernourished. So that was first objective of our study. And the second objective was if FOS supplementation to these children brought about any change in their morbidity status, serum IgA levels and gut health. Okay. Again, the study design was very robust. We use a double-blind placebo control trial. I'm sure the students would not understand this well, but it's okay. You can just know that the study design used was a robust one. Now let us try to see the results. What were the results? First, we tried to see whether there was a difference in the incidence of common cold in the nourished and the undernourished children. Yes, there was a significant difference. Even the nourished children did suffer from common cold, but the undernourished children suffered from 70% of the children suffered from common colds as compared to 51% children who suffered from. So there was a difference of almost 19%. What about diarrhea? Was there a difference between the nourished and the undernourished children in the incidences of diarrhea? Yes, there was a great difference in the incidences of diarrhea in the nourished and the undernourished children. And it seems there was a significant difference. And as the undernutrition scenario deteriorated, okay, that means they were in from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3 undernutrition. You all know, I'm sure you all must be studying that. There was a significant reduction, okay. There was a significant rise in the incidence of diarrhea, from 22% in grade 1 to 36% in grade 2 to 62.5% of the children, they suffered from diarrhea. So this was also statistically significant. So you can see just by studying the incidence of diarrhea in these undernourished children, we found that just by becoming undernourished, you suffer from diarrhea as well as common colds. Okay. All right. Now, we try to compare the gut health also of this undernourished and well-nourished children. So can you see the first two children are the undernourished children? And we tried to find there was a significant, the gut health, that is the lactobacillus was much, much lower in undernourished children. The first two children are the undernourished children, whereas the lactobacillus colonization was much better in the nourished children. Can you see 6.02 in the nourished children and 5.83 in the undernourished children? And this was statistically significant. Similarly, when we try to see the nourished children, there was much better colonization of bifidobacteria as compared to, there was 8.12, whereas in the undernourished children, the colonization was simply 7.84. Okay, this was also, the difference was statistically significant. Then we try to see the bad bacteria, whether there were more bad bacteria colonized in the undernourished children. Yes, certainly the E. coli, we measured it by measuring E. coli, and we found that the E. coli in the undernourished children were much higher than the nourished children, and this was also statistically significant. What about when we tried to see the colonization of this bacteria in grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3 children? We found that as the degree of undernourishment increased, that is from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, the colonization of lactobacilla also reduced. Similarly, for bifidobacteria, which is a good bacteria, the colonization of good bacteria reduced as the grade of undernourishment increased from grade 1 to grade 2 to grade 3. What about the E. coli? Similar picture was also seen with E. coli, that as the colonization, as the grade of undernutrition increased, the increase in colonization of the harmful bacteria, that is E. coli, also increased. So we also try to see the mean IgA levels of children having different nutritional status. And you can see that there was an increase in the IgA levels also of the children from grade 1 to grade 3. This was for just when we compared the colonization of the bacteria in different grades of undernutrition. What about the another parameter that we chose was common colds? Okay, to one group of children, we fed Amul. Both the groups were fed Amul ice cream, but in one group, okay, we fed with FOS incorporated. Okay, 10 grams we incorporated FOS, and in another group of children we did not add any. It was a placebo group. But to both the groups, ice cream was fed. Again, the study design was robust. It was double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and we found that there was an incidence, there was a difference in the common cold incidences in both the groups by 24%. Okay, So what did we finally conclude from this study? That 30 days, just simply 30 days of FOS supplementation over a period of 45 days beneficially impacted the undernourished children by increasing the colonization of bifidobacteria and lactic acid bacteria, by decreasing the colonization of E. coli, and also by reduction in the diarrheal episodes by 79.6% and in common cold episode by 82%. Okay, this study was followed by developing, because we felt that this was a very important finding and we should share it with the community. We developed a book on prebiotics, our gut guardian, and by me along with my PhD student Tanushree Singh, we developed this book, and which has more than about 20 recipes, which can be shared with people in the community. I have also got a copyright for this booklet. So what are the take-home messages from my talk? Number one, gut health plays a very important role in etiology of non-communicable diseases, oral health. Of course, I did not present my studies on oral health, and the morbidities related to undernutrition status. Also, improvement in the gut health can be brought about by daily intake of probiotics and prebiotics. Prebiotics help in lowering the pH of the gut, enhancing the production of short-chain fatty acids, especially propionates and butyrates. Undernourished children can be fed 7 to 10 grams of FOS daily to improve their gut health and morbidity profile in terms of reduction in diarrhea and common cold episodes. And the daily intake of 10 grams of FOS improves gut health and endotoxemia. About the oral health study, we did it on buttermilk, and we found that even daily intake of buttermilk also helps in improving the colonization of the good bacteria in your gut. So I'm sure at least one take-home message for all of you will be that if you're not used to drinking buttermilk daily, please start drinking buttermilk daily. Certainly it will have some good impact on not only your gut health, not only on your obesity profile, but recently we have just concluded the study. One of my doctoral students just concluded that it can even have good effect on your mental health. Daily intake of buttermilk, 200 ml of buttermilk, can have a good, not the musky buttermilk, because there the organisms are destroyed, but the buttermilk which comes as a fresh buttermilk from even the dairy, you can take that and it will certainly have good impact on your gut health. Okay, so I thank you all for patient listening. I hope I have not confused you all, but you have understood some of the concepts that I wanted to tell you about the prebiotics, probiotics, and synbiotics. And this is the group of students who have been working with me for my research on prebiotics. And I really owe a lot to them, because they are the ones who have produced all these results. I thank them all from bottom of my heart. And I thank you all once again for patient listening.
Okay. Ma'am, can you stop sharing your screen?
I'll do that. If there are no questions, I will.
Anyone has any questions? We can take up a few questions if.
I'm seeing Shubha ma'am also in the group. Is she there?
Ma'am, I think she left.
Okay, I was so happy to see her. I'm not finding that icon for stop sharing. Wait, let me try. Yes, I think I'll know.
Yeah. Okay. Ma'am, it was a really great presentation, and I really enjoyed it. I hope all the students also enjoyed it. It was really informative. We are getting feedbacks from students. If anyone has any questions, you can ask it. I think the PPT was clear enough.
Oh, thank you so much. So can we leave the sheet?
1 minute. Yeah, so I formally thank Dr. Minishek for being the part of the webinar and giving us all the information on prebiotics, such important information which no one had. And ma'am, thank you for being there with us. It was a great brainstorming session for everyone on prebiotic and gut health. Thank you.
I thank you, Arpi, for giving me this opportunity. I'm so happy that you're doing so well at the Parul University. Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Can I leave now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, the students and everyone.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, you can leave.